So our agenda, the introduction, that's what's happening right now. Then there's going to be a quick interactive survey where we're going to see the responses as you guys are submitting them. This is something new. I've never done it before, so we'll see how it works. Hopefully it'll work pretty well. And then we'll move on to submitted questions. There were a lot of submitted questions, 17, I think, and then Q&A from the chat at the end. So really quickly, NCTFA has a variety of programs. Our policy group is what's doing internally this town hall. Our policy group meets every second and fourth Monday of the month. I encourage you to join if you're at all interested. We have a variety of farmer circles. We have a listserv where farmers can chat with each other about questions, programming, advice. We have the Climate Smart Grant list. Would you like to say anything about that really quickly?
Sure. Just that we're currently accepting applications. The deadline is coming up on December 13th. And you can go to newctfarmers.com to find out more information.
Fantastic. And I'll put some links to these things in the chat in a little bit. And I just wanted to highlight that there's some really exciting stuff going on December 12th. NCTFA is holding its, I don't know how many annual seed variety discussion. So please sign up for that. And again, I'll put the link in the chat in a little bit. On January 25th, we're going to have our Farmer to Farmer conference. It's going to be jam-packed with really interactive, fantastic content led by farmers for farmers.
Xfinity sent me an email saying that we have to up.
I'm sorry? Okay, I'm going to keep going. And now, so what I'd like you guys to do is go to menti.com and enter the code you see on your screen or use the QR code to get there. You can do this on your computer or on your phone. I'm going to give you a little bit of time to do this. All right. I can't see participants, but like if you guys can give a bunch of thumbs up, then Liz can let me know that it's good that we're good to go to the next screen. Okay, I see one thumbs up. Is that from? Two. All right, keep it coming, people. I really appreciate you being guinea pigs on this today. I'm sorry? All right, I'm gonna move to the next screen. All right, so people who are there, if you can answer this question, we should be able to see it. Yeah, there you go. See, people are, there we go. This is really nice. We seem to have a cross section of farmer allies, new farmers, old new farmers. Fantastic. Thanks so much. All right, there's only two more. What do you produce? Ooh, a lot of livestock farmers today. That's good. We have a livestock question in queue for you. All right, yay, veggies. Okay. And then this is a write-in question. What ag issues are most on your mind today? Community. Ooh, we're definitely going to be talking about land access today and equity and economic security. And climate disaster relief. Yes, and supporting QT BIPOC farmers. We're going to be hitting up on most of that today, so fantastic. More funding, absolutely. Endurance, yeah. Fantastic. A really big range of questions, which are of ideas on people's minds, which is nice because that reflects all the variety of questions that we're asking DoAG today. All right, so now I'm going to stop sharing the screen and turn this over to the commissioner. Thank you so much for being here today, sir.
Thank you, everybody. And thank you, Ella, for coordinating this and for inviting the department to share out some of what we've been working on and some of what we're going to be focused on in the future as we roll through into 2025. I appreciate this being moved up each year. I think we've moved a little bit and repositioned this town hall. I think the first year we did it, it was after the legislative session. The next year it was the beginning of the legislative session. I think last year was at the closer to the beginning of the legislative session. Now we have this one in advance of the legislative session. So I think that is helpful for an advocacy group to understand what is happening and what's planning on happening at the state capitol. I'm going to roll through a little bit about what we have been working on in 2024. Then I'm going to turn it over to Jamie to talk about what grants and programs that might be of interest to the people on the call today will be rolling out in 2025. So over the past couple of years, the department has been really intently focused on increasing diversity in agriculture. This has been born through a couple of experiences. One, the need to increase resiliency in the agricultural industry in the state of Connecticut, as we saw during the COVID pandemic, that the supply chain, the food systems were very fragile. And so the challenges that were presented when any one little piece of the puzzle broke down because there wasn't redundancy or backstops built into the programs across the nation really caused huge impacts across a large area. The other piece is increasing diversity of who's farming. We grow a lot of different types of crops from the ground to the sound in the state of Connecticut. And we want to make sure that we're representing the people of the state of Connecticut across the farmer table, if you will. So we have been focused on diversifying who's farming in Connecticut with a particular outreach to BIPOC farmers, female, veteran, new and beginning farmers. We're interested in diversifying what they are farming and selling. So we're putting more urban and suburban lands into production. We're also adding farmers markets and farm stands into those communities. We're interested in diversifying how people are farming. So climate smart technologies and practices, controlled environment agriculture, what they are farming, more culturally appropriate foods for different ethnicities that represent, again, the residents of the state. And then also what they're selling. How do we get more value-added products and aggregated products so that Connecticut farmers are gaining a larger share of the market dollar? We think those efforts are aligned with our mission of resiliency through diversity. And we centered our work and our program work around those. And for those of you who haven't met Jamie Smith before, Jamie runs our Ag Development, Climate Smart, and Resource Conservation units. She's the Bureau Director. She's been with the department for a number of years, does an excellent job not only thinking about what we're trying to accomplish, but using her knowledge of the programs and her knowledge of Connecticut farmers to make sure that we are rebalancing that. So as we've talked about, Jamie and I have talked about diversity, as she works with her team, she knows that this theme has to run through any grant draft guidance, any scoring criteria, our advisor panels and review panels, and she's a great partner in this effort. And part of this is that we are tracking outcomes. The department did not have a similar focus prior to the Lamont administration, and we didn't do such a great job in tracking outcomes on a holistic annual basis where we can determine what was happening in the previous year, what do we need to tweak, how do we adjust it. So I wanted to share out some of the results that reflect that priority area of resiliency through diversity, targeting BIPOC, female, veteran, new and beginning farmers. So the first one on our farm transition grant, we made 17 awards to new and beginning farmers last year, and over the previous years created the new farmer micro grant program. We made 39 total awards, so just under half of the awards that the department made in the contracts that we had were to new and beginning farmers. Through our Ag Enhancement Program, which is our municipalities, nonprofits, Council of Governments eligible programs, we made 3 awards to improve the local food supply, 3 awards to increase urban agricultural activities, 3 awards to increase DEI efforts across the industry, and 7 for youth agricultural education. Our farm to school efforts, our Connecticut Grown for Connecticut Kids, were a huge hit last year. We had over 100 applications, and we were able to make 53 awards on that program. That is our largest program by volume of awards by far. And we were connecting a lot of new and beginning farmers into the wholesale marketplace and into buying or selling into schools. There were schools and early childhood education centers. It wasn't just schools. And as part of our DEI effort, we have been translating our documents, making sure that they are in multiple languages to reflect the people who may want to apply for them. And for the first time ever, that at least we are aware of, we received 2 Spanish applications. So clearly we've got more work to do, but I think it's an indicator that we have been able to extend and expand our reach beyond our traditional communities and the people that we touch. Our local food purchase assistance program, in particular, our contract with Food Share was over $2 million, over 1 million pounds of food purchased over the life of that program. And working with Jason and his team, we said this has to prioritize small and new and beginning farmers. That is part of the mission with these dollars. And 25% of the farmers that they were purchasing from would classify as socially disadvantaged by the USDA definition. So they heard that it wasn't necessarily the easiest thing for them to do. It would have been easy for them to purchase commodities on the commodity market, but they recognized that this was something that we wanted them to include and value in their contracting process.
Thank you so much for giving all this information, Commissioner. And I know that you could go on because the DoAG has achieved so much. Unfortunately, we are on a tight schedule. So I didn't know if you want
I'll just be 2 more minutes, Ella, and these are important because I think as we talk about what the department has been doing, it's really important for people to understand what we've been able to accomplish with the limited programs and staff that we have. So our FarmLink program, connecting new and beginning farmers to new pieces of land, we were able to increase our reach by double-digit percentages and make 26 new connections between landowners and seekers. And then the final one I'll add before I turn it over to Jamie is that we launched our local capital market access program, which was a USDA contract. We are the only Department of Agriculture in the nation that received a grant this type of grant. And this will create a pipeline to support programs and down payment assistance programs for BIPOC farmers to purchase their first farms. So really proud of that work. And I think all of that ladders up to a consistent message that the department is focused on increasing resiliency through diversity. And when you look at our program outcomes, it aligns with our desire to achieve those goals. And Jamie was going to talk a little bit about what I think some of your members may be interested in our grant programs in the 2025 year.
Thank you so much.
There we go. Okay, thank you very much, Ella. My name is Jamie Smith. I'm the Bureau Director for Agricultural Development and Resource Conservation at the Connecticut Department of Agriculture. You don't need to remember all of that, but know that the agency has a number of grant programs that are available to farmers, new and beginning and otherwise. The one grant program I wanted to take a minute to highlight today is our Farm Transition Grant Program. That is open through January 10th. And one of the things that I encourage everyone to take advantage of are the open office hours that Allie Rose, the grant coordinator, is going to be hosting. There's one coming up on the 12th of December. We have another one a week or so later. I've dropped a link to the chat, which will provide you direct access to the website where you can register for that. But what's good to know about this grant program is we offer a variety of categories farmers can apply to, ranging from awards of $5,000 all the way up to $50,000. There are match requirements, which again varies based on the category for which you're applying. But this is by far our most popular grant opportunity, given it is the most broad and diverse. So whether you're looking to purchase a small implement type of a piece of equipment for your farm, or you're looking to begin a new innovative practice that you're looking to pilot, we're really looking to support farmers to do a whole variety of practices and utilize this funding opportunity to do that. For those who may be involved in other organizations, such as New Connecticut Farmer Alliance or otherwise, I will quickly mention we have our Ag Enhancement Grant that will be opening after the first of the year. Allie Rose is also the contact for that, and I will drop a link to the chat to that in just a minute. The grant program that is also coming up that will have most to producers is the Resilient Food System Infrastructure Grant Program. That guidance is slated to come out in February. It is federally funded dollars, and it is intended to purchase equipment for middle of the supply chain infrastructure. So it is only open to farmers. I'm sorry, nonprofits are also eligible to apply, but it is intended for the purchase of equipment. So if you're, say you currently have a commercial kitchen and you're looking to purchase a new piece of equipment to enable processing of some kind, it could be a freezer to enable you to offer a frozen food product of some kind, or maybe you need to freeze your food in order to make it, transportable, whatever it might be. This grant program will really provide you that opportunity. What is important to remember is the focus is middle of the supply chain. So it isn't intended for harvesting. It isn't intended for direct to consumer sales, but that middle of the supply chain. And once we release the guidance, we will be offering open office hours, and just as we do all of our other grant programs. And then the last program I do want to highlight and mention is our Land Capital Market Access Program, which Commissioner briefly mentioned. We currently have the letter of intent application open. It is non-competitive. So this program is broken up into two phases. The first phase is the letter of intent phase. And by submitting that, we will connect you with our farm business navigator. who actually resides at Yukon Extension. Many of you know him. His name is Robert Chang. And he is going to sit down and work with you to develop a plan for education and training to make sure that you have access to the necessary free technical assistance, so that as you move through the process and begin to explore land acquisition options, there is additional support provided to participants in the space regarding taxes, real estate and legal advice, marketing, accounting, financial advisors, a whole litany of support services. In June, we will be opening the full competitive grant application to the Connecticut Farmland Access Fund, and only those individuals who submitted a letter of intent can pursue a full application in the competitive round of the Connecticut Farmland Access Fund. So please make sure if there is an interest that you do submit this application. I will drop a link in the chat to the guidance document. And if you have questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. Serena Thibodeau is managing this particular grant program. So this is funded through the USDA. And we're really looking forward to seeing the outcomes of this. As Commissioner mentioned, this is very historical. Never has the agency ever provided a grant to farmers to purchase land. So we're very excited about what's to come, and very thankful for our partners at Yukon Extension, American Farmland Trust, and Connecticut Farmland Trust for working with us on this project. So with that, I hope that was quick enough. Ella, I will turn it back over to you.
Thank you. And I really appreciate you two going through this quickly. I know you have a lot to say. And I want to the audience members here, I want to stress how amazing and helpful the program managers for the different grants that Jamie was just talking about are. Like, please, please, please reach out to them if you have any questions. They are really there to support you. They're vested people. They're not just random like bureaucrats in some office. They want farmers to succeed. So please reach out to them. Okay, now I'm going to, sorry. Okay, everyone can unmute themselves. Great. So we're going to go into the Q&A portion with the pre-submitted questions. A lot of people are going to be asking different questions. I'll call out the person whose turn it is, and then you go and ask ahead. So Mia, please get us started with the big picture level questions. You should be able to, you can't unmute yourself? I thought, oh, sorry. Okay, there. Now you should be able to.
There it goes. Okay, great.
Apologies.
So my name's Mia Calaswano, and I am one of the steering committee members on NCTFA and a farmer with Lathrop Farm in Lebanon, Connecticut. Jamie, thanks for being here. Commissioner, thanks for your time tonight. I'll start with a very easy question. We know that there's lots of change coming down the pike, and of course, the future is not predictable, but given talk of Rollins and Project 2025, are there programs that are at risk for being defunded federally, like climate change and nutrition support, that the state perhaps is developing plans to support at a state level?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Mia, and great question. And I wish I had more information. The reality is, and I was on a national call today with other state departments of agriculture, is that nobody really knows. There's so much information that's floating around that nobody really has a true understanding of what is on the table here. And there's also the reality that Congress moves slowly. And as the previous Congress has proven, they don't always act as a unit. And so, a lot of what is being discussed would require Congress to act in a way that would allow the changes to happen. So, you know, a lot of us are interested in the secretary appointee, Brooke Rollins, and see where she is. She doesn't have an professional ag background, but I learned today that she was an FFA state elected or a member of the Texas State FFA, you know, steering committee. So she's, you know, she's got some ag background, which was helpful to know that we, you know, I didn't read that in any of her bios previously. You know, Congress has punted on, and quite honestly, the Biden administration allowed it to happen on reauthorization of the Farm Bill. And that puts a lot of things at risk. So, you know, one of the reasons why the Congress couldn't get to terms on the Farm Bill was the SNAP program and food security programs with Republican control of the Senate and the House and the White House, who seems to be interested in this. I think there's going to be rollbacks on the level of support that SNAP brings. I think there's likely to be some levels of support that'll change for programs like Farm to School and who's eligible for free and reduced meals. But do we have an idea? You know, everything has been talked about, but the ability to execute is pretty limited. We as a region are getting together in the near future, the commissioners and secretaries and directors of agriculture, to talk about what we think is at most risk. But there's not a, you know, the mandate was change, and it's not clear what change means and where it will be. And given the breadth of what the change thought is, you know, how does Congress prioritize? And the United States Senator had mentioned earlier this week that they might not even get to the Farm Bill until next September, October, because there's just so many other things. So Congress would have to reauthorize the current Farm Bill, which this Congress, before the next Congress is sworn in January. Quite honestly, that may be the best thing, is to reauthorize the current Farm Bill, allow farmers to lock in contracts with NRCS or farm school programming, LFPA extension, which we haven't heard anything since the announcement back in October, and lock those in and buy a year out of a 4-year term in a 5-year Farm Bill with a little bit more consistency with what's been happening. I will say, and I didn't know this until this morning, so I'm hoping more people did, but apparently NRCS did allow for an expansion and extension of EQIP dollars. If you had a previous EQIP contract with NRCS, for the past year, NRCS did not allow farmers access to any additional dollars if they had expended all of their max capacity. So that is really good news, and I encourage anybody who is interested in an NRCS project, which could be, you know, a climate smart project, it could be cover crops, it could be a new building, to get to your NRCS office and start that conversation so you can get signed into a contract as soon as you possibly can. But right now we're all in a very, you know, patient monitoring, you know, position, trying to understand what the priority would be. But I see Jamie came off, and I'm not sure if she has something else to add to that.
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in with regard to food benefit programs. The Farmers Market Nutrition Program, both the WIC and the Senior Program, achieved over $1 million in redemption this year, which is just absolutely mind-blowing. And more than half of the budget overall that we receive comes from the state of Connecticut. So I feel good that, you know, even if, you know, we would be impacted on something like the Farmers Market Nutrition Program, the state has been such a champion on that, and I don't see that wavering anytime soon. The other thing I want to highlight is our Climate Smart Ag and Forestry program that we previously ran was state funded. And the Restoration, Resiliency, and Preparedness grant program which also is meant to support farmers with climate smart practices and resiliency work, is also state funded. So the good news is that we're finding ways to continue that work in the absence of federal dollars anyway. So I'm going to stay optimistic on that.
That's great, thank you. And I think that's what people are really interested in, is where can Connecticut step up, or perhaps the federal government is going to be defunding areas. Jamie, one of the questions was, is there going to be another round of the farmland restoration climate resiliency?
There will be,
Okay.
but not after some major conversations, some focus groups and retooling, because that's been an experience. We try to change things up from our traditional restoration grant program. And there's opportunity for change there. I will just say that. So more to come on that. We're currently in the process right now of drafting contracts for the previous farms that were awarded. And once we get through that, we're going to move on to adjusting the framework for that program.
Great, thank you both.
Thank you so much, Mia. We have so many questions. I really, really appreciate the depth and thoughtfulness of your answers, and I wish that we did not have time limitations so that we could just go into everything with the consideration that it deserves. But unfortunately, we're gonna have to kind of speed run through some of these. Caitlin, please, if you can take us to the state level now.
Hi, good evening, Commissioner Jamie and everyone. My name is Caitlin Kimball. I own Sunset Farm in Naugatuck, and I'm also the Director of Agriculture at City Seed. My question is very similar. You somewhat answered it already. My question is around the state legislature and the budget. So Connecticut is expected to have a budget shortfall statewide. So how do you foresee this affecting the Department of Agriculture? And then, are there any other items outside of FMMP and nutrition benefits that we should pay attention to for the upcoming budget year at the state level?
Yeah, great question. Good to see you again and virtually. I was just thinking I need to get down to New Haven again in the near future. The governor's drafting his budget now. It will be presented publicly in February. The legislature will review and have public hearings, through April and into May. They'll release their budget, and I think we'll have a state budget on time in late May. And the governor's been consistent with his desire for the legislature to pass the budget before they go home for the legislative session. That's that's the timeline, and we are locked in until the governor's budget is publicly available. But I think what we've been able to do, and what the Lamont administration has been able to do, is invest in its agencies. And so when we look at the members of the DoAG team, over 50% of the agency is made up of people who have less than 5 years in the agency. So we have been hiring people, backfilling people, creating new roles like the Climate Smart Ag Unit. We've been investing in programs like the Farmland Preservation Unit and building depth there. So those positions are locked in, which is great. The challenge that we're going to have is if somebody leaves. Right now we are in an essentially a hiring freeze. Each agency gets some top priority hires as they come up, but we've got to be very selective on what positions we're going to hire across the agency. So the good news is we're in a pretty good spot going into that sort of thing. The bad news is, if you lose somebody, clearly, capacity decreases. I think for things to pay attention to, obviously your line item funding, the department receives, a lot of our farmland preservation dollars come from the feds, but the vast majority of our program dollars, as Jamie mentioned in the previous answer, are state dollars. So making sure that we don't lose any dollars there. Head counts, our staff count is limited and set in the state budget. So our current head count by the budget is 52 because we were able to leverage additional federal dollars. We're closer to 60, but if that state number goes down, then we're going to have to get creative as to how we maintain our head count. And then another big one would be the Community Investment Act. That is a funded program that is paid for through real estate transaction fees. But in previous budget deficit years, the legislature and the governor's offices have looked at that as a source of funding to use to offset a deficit. So those are kind of the large buckets. I would suggest that the Alliance pay attention to. I would also say pick some priorities and be really clear what your priorities are. An acknowledgement that it's going to be very, very difficult in order to create new programs, get new funding passed. So what's the priority for this group? And then make sure that your message is consistent and loud at the state capitol. If you have 8 priorities, then somebody at the Capitol is going to pick the priority for you. So you're going to want to be very deliberate with what your focus is on. I think that that's a piece of advice that goes well for any legislative session. But when people are looking potentially at cuts, it's even more important to be very, very focused.
Thank you so much. So now we're going to turn to what's perennially on farmers' minds, land access. Ellie, can you please take it away?
Yeah, thank you for being here, Commissioner Hurlbert and Jamie. I have first a 2-parter question submitted by one of our farmer members that gets back to what you were saying earlier about tracking outcomes on a holistic basis. DoAG often celebrates the amount of farmland that has been preserved in the state, but how much has been lost in the past year or in the past 5 years? What can we do to transparently track and change this trend?
Yeah, I mean, we do celebrate it because every closing that we have is one more than we had before, and it's one more parcel that's preserved in perpetuity for access to agriculture. So, you'll hear me say a lot between now and forever that we closed on 50,000 acres this year. That's a huge number, and I think we should be proud of it. We have, with Jamie's work, raced through program upgrades and updates to make sure that not only are we plugging along on our larger goal, but we are moving more quickly, and each individual application is moving from application phase to closing phase much more quickly. Last year, Jamie, you know the number, I forget if it was 3 or 6 that were under 2 years. 6 farms, so we were able to close on 6 farms in under 2 years. That's unheard of in this agency. So what we have been doing is refining the program. We've, as I mentioned before, we're increasing our staff, and we've got multiple positions, I think, that Jamie put in the chat, to understand that we have more responsibilities and we have to move more quickly. We are doing things like proposing to the farmer and the landowner that we're offering 100% of the appraised value. That removes the need to negotiate. It also removes the feeling of bad will when, if your land comes in at, say, $10,000 an acre, and the department offers you $5,000 an acre. We have cut that practice out and said, if your land is valued at $10,000 an acre, we're going to pay you $10,000 an acre. And that's a fair deal. We want you to feel good about this process. So that has also cut down on the amount of time of the back and forth, because the landowner will say, well, what can you give me 6? And the department would consider if we would do 6, and then it'd go to 7. So we're just, cutting that out. The State Property Review Board has to review each and every application before we can proceed with closing. That process could take, 6 to 9 to 18 months when I started here. We are now in 6 to 9 weeks on closing through or moving through the State Property Review Board. So we have compressed everywhere we can compress. We are actively seeking applications. Cam and his team are hyper aware of the ASAP-AL deadlines that NRCS has to make sure that we're taking full advantage of the potential 50% match. So we're moving applications into that process more quickly. We also just had a nearly $10 million approved through the Bond Commission, which the last time the Bond Commission approved any dollars for the Farmland Preservation Program was 18 years ago. So we are drawing down on our funds, we're spending our funds, we're increasing staff, we're working better with our partners. We're doing all of these things, recognizing that we are chasing a goal that is moving on us and challenges that we don't control, i.e. the real estate values and the need for farmers to want to sell off some land and some real estate. So we don't track the number of acres that's lost on an annual basis. What we do is we use the USDA Census of Agriculture. So that comes out every 5 years. And over the 2017 and the 2022 census, we lost just over 9,000 acres over 5 years. So just under 2,000 acres a year. To put it in perspective, last year was the best year that we ever had in the program history for farmland preservation, and we preserved 1,500 acres. So it becomes more and more important that we increase our operational efficiency on closings to try to balance that a little bit better. So that's what we're doing. But I would challenge the group here, let's get 5 applications from new Connecticut Farmer Alliance members into our farmland preservation program through either the traditional farmland preservation or the community farms program. We need everybody pumping applications into the system so that we have those ready to go when NRCS opens up their application period and work through and make sure that we have a pipeline that will help balance the lost acres that quite honestly are challenging for us to do. The other thing that I'll touch on is farm viability is important. And when we talk about farmland, a successful, profitable farm doesn't face the same challenge as an unsuccessful, non-profitable farm, right? I mean, it's a lot more appealing to sell your land if you're losing money. So we talked about our transition grant. We talked about the work that we've done on food systems and the other grant programs that we've been paying attention to. So we are trying to increase farm viability, which will, in and of its own outcomes, help support active farming across the state. And we're trying to do that, on the other side of Jamie's bureau with the ag development units. I don't know, Jamie, if you had anything to add or wanted to share about that.
I just want to call out the 2 links I dropped in the chat for the hiring of 3 new staff in the farmland preservation unit. And the addition of this staff is going to help us really establish an acquisition team and a stewardship team. And really help us be more efficient in both spaces. Right now, there's 4 staff trying to do everything, and it just isn't the best way for anybody to be working. So I'm looking forward to that. By doing that, we also have the opportunity to start paying more attention to the farmland program. Our partnership with Land for Good and Connecticut Farmland Trust recently expired. We went out to bid, and now we're currently in the contracting phase, drafting contracts for potential new partnerships with folks who applied. I'm hoping that maybe we have the opportunity to bring some of that work in-house as well, and that will really speak and work on the farmland access issue. And then there's our land capital market access grant. I'm really hopeful that that program will have volume on it, right? I'm really hoping that we're going to have a number of folks participate, even if they don't apply for the grant program when that application is released, to have them participate and go through the education process and working with technical assistance advisors to build that knowledge and capacity. I hope people leverage those resources that are there. It's free. And so I'm looking forward to what that outcome is. And then we also have our report that CLCC did for us as a result of the DEI working group recommendation. We still have to advance that. There were a number of really great areas for us to start exploring for how we could implement some of those recommendations and suggestions in Connecticut. And that's just a space where I need to spend time on it. And I'm hopeful that after we hire the stewardship staff and kind of get things settled there, that will give us the opportunity to start advancing some of that work too. So I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, thank you so much. It sounds
And
like
I just want to
Oh,
add
sorry.
the stewardship piece that, you know, we've been focused on new applications and preserving new parcels. 40% of our time last year was spent on stewarding current, you know, preserved parcels. So those parcels are getting more and more difficult to ensure are staying in agriculture or available to agriculture. And so we really need to backfill our staff time because we cannot balance the challenge of meeting the real estate need and getting new properties into the program when 40% of our staff time across the unit is spent making sure that people understand what their farmland preservation protocols mean. And I just dropped in the CLCC report in the chat that Jamie had mentioned. I suggest people take a look at it because it's a really comprehensive report.
Thank you. It sounds like there aren't metrics right now outside of the census to track that loss. But I think that is something that's just of interest to farmers from NCTFA that we'd like to raise for the future when there are staff and capabilities, or if you're working with other partners that are measuring, so that was also reflected alongside the great successes. But I'll pass it back to Ella to call the next person.
The one thing I'll say, Ellie, is perhaps additional information. It lives within AFT. They're also really good about tracking that at a more granular level than the census is. So if that's a measurable that NCTFA is interested in sort of being mindful of and aware of and sort of saying, okay, well, this is what we're losing. This is what the agency is preserving. That would be the next place I go to get that data.
I'd also say that the Ag Enhancement Grant is an opportunity for nonprofits to submit for projects that are of interest to them, and farmland preservation and access is one of the program priority areas. So that might be another way for NCTFA to engage in that.
Thank you. Obviously, there's so much to discuss about farmland access, so not surprisingly, the next question is going to be about that too. Liz Guerra, will you please take it away?
Hi, good evening. So what farmland access tools beyond option to purchase at ag value does DoAG see itself using in the near future to make farmland more affordable?
I'm sorry, that was a little choppy, Liz. What was the question? What beyond OPAB do we see?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I think our LCMA is a huge opportunity. Implementing some of the CLCC reports is another huge opportunity that we've been pursuing. I will say anything else would take legislation, budget, and staff. So we've got to be very careful as to what we would pursue at the legislature. And again, I would say, you know, NCTFA should be dialed in as to what the priority is for the organization going into the next legislative session. But LCMA is a huge, I mean, it's $1.5 million that's going to be available for BIPOC farmers to purchase land with support from the entry point of agriculture through buying and starting your business. But Jamie, I don't know if you had anything else that you wanted to add on that one.
I would also encourage folks, you know, the agency does not currently have the ability to enter into an OPAB or purchase an OPAB. But there are a number of land trusts in Connecticut. You know, I'm not going to pick on CFT, but there are many land trusts in Connecticut that have the ability to enter into an OPAB right now. So that would be something that I encourage folks to just be mindful of, that's an option. I know folks really tend to look towards the agency, but statutorily, we do not currently have that capacity. And we work really well with a whole slew of um, land trusts in Connecticut. So if that's something that someone has an interest in, I'm more than happy to chat with those land trusts. The other thing that is also an option, which isn't necessarily an OPAP, but might work towards that farmland affordability and access issue, is for some of our older easements where the restrictions aren't what they are right now. Additional restrictions can be purchased on the land so that they could become more affordable to a future farmer. So that's something else to keep in mind. It's a little complicated, but it's a real estate transaction, right? I mean, they're all complicated. But again, we're more than happy to chat with folks, land trusts, interested parties, whomever, to walk through what those options would look like if anyone is interested.
Thank you. So just like farmland access is perpetually on all farmers' minds, this next topic is going to be one that I think is going to be on people's minds more and more as years go by. Liz, can you take it away? Liz Castle.
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Liz Castle. I'm the Climate Smart Project Lead with NCTFA. And my question tonight that I'm going to share is around climate disaster. What is the state's plan for climate disaster relief for Connecticut farmers, and how will it work specifically for small farmers?
Yeah, that's a great question, Liz. We have not done disaster relief programs. Historically, traditionally, the state has not taken on that role. And it hasn't been until just last year that even other states in the region have taken on that role. And the governor's challenge to us was, we might not be able to prevent the floods or rain events, but what can we do to build resiliency in Connecticut agriculture? And so last year, in response to the Connecticut River Valley floods, Jamie and her team retooled the Farmland Restoration Program to be a flood response grant. And we released over $300,000 to about 20 farms for them to clean up, repair, restore lands that had been impacted from those rain events. Our RP, the Farmland Restoration Climate Resiliency Preparedness Grant, is one of those tools that we have available to invest up to $100,000 for larger farms, $50,000 for smaller farms, in order to build resiliency in their land. And as Jamie said, a lot of mixed results as we go through that process. So we know that there's a need for it. We know that there's a desire for it. We've just got to fine tune the program. Our Climate Smart Ag and Forestry Grant program, which you know better than I do, for what the impact could be on an individualized basis, is another way that we took large sums of money, granted them out to organizations to do the groundwork and do the actual contracting and the individual farm by farm work. And the goal from that was to share out those findings to make sure that we are leveraging that initial investment with investments down the road. But when it comes specifically to disaster relief, I mean, quite honestly, in the past year, I've had conversations with insurance companies that run excess risk programs. I've worked with legislators on pursuing potential captive insurance programs. We've discussed with legislators on USDA supplement programs. We've talked to large philanthropic organizations about how they could set up a program. So we've done a lot of work around it. I'll be honest, last year we had over $30 million in losses across the state between the two frost freeze events in February and May, and then the flooding event in July. That doesn't include the losses that happened from July through November when it rained nearly every weekend and farmers market sales were down and production got really challenging. And we got one legislative proposal on a disaster response program, and it was the captive insurance program. It wouldn't have done anything to help offset the losses that any Connecticut farmer experienced. So when I talk about it, and it sounds like a broken record perhaps, but when I talk about the need for a consistent, clear message, it's going to be important that all of the ag stakeholders, and Ella and I were participating in a meeting yesterday, find what a disaster program looks like and use that as the model to put forward to the legislature. They will not create the right program, the perfect program on their own. They don't have the bandwidth, they don't have the knowledge, they need something to respond to. So I would suggest that if that's number one for the group and for the members, then you make it number one, and Ella works with everybody who was the 25-ish people who were around the table yesterday to make sure the legislature understands and values that as a top priority and a necessary priority to make sure that a new and beginning farmer can withstand a challenge at the front end of their career in agriculture, knowing that they have a support system between the feds and the state or philanthropic to make sure that they can get through some of those tougher years. I'll also say we've been working closely with the federal delegation. I've spent more time with the 7 members of our federal delegation over the past year on these issues than I spent in the previous 15 years that I've been involved in ag policy. They are really honed in on the challenges that we've experienced and understand how important it is for USDA and the federal government to intervene in a way that supports small diversified farms from their perspective, namely in Connecticut. But there's an acknowledgement on a call with 3 members of the delegation and some congressional committee staff that the current farm risk management programs don't work. And if we want to get serious, we need to reform NAP. We need to reform whole farm revenue programs. We need to look at farm subsidy programs and adjust them to make sure that they're supporting everybody who's in agriculture, not just a very small minority of the number of farmers that we have and need to continue to feed the nation. But it's something that, multiple conversations, multiple times a week. It's definitely on a top 5 of issues that consume some of my time.
Thank you so much. I'll pass it back to Ella.
All right, we are an hour in, half an hour to go. I really appreciate your time, particularly when a lot of these questions are questions that, in and of themselves could individually take an hour or more to answer. So now we're going to move it on to ag infrastructure. Brittany, please take it away. Brittany, sorry.
All right, I am Brittany Hall. I own Beets and Blooms Farm with my wife, and I am one of the NCTFA steering committee members. So my question is about the 30 by 30 initiative, and we're wondering if it's still active, and if so, what is DoAG's plans for advancing this agenda?
Yeah, 30. Well, first, nice to meet you. 30 by 30 still active. Let's just be honest. It's a stretch goal. It requires 500,000 acres of new land put into production and a retooling of 500,000 acres from one type of production into another. So 1 million acres across New England needs to either be put in production or put into different production. That's good. That's hard, right? But it's a stretch goal, and the direction is what's important. And we do participate in the 30 by 30 program. Serena is our point person on it. She attends their regular meetings. She participates. There was their conference in October. Jamie, was it in Vermont that she attended on behalf of the agency? Not a funded role that she has, but a role that we at the agency have said is important. We funded the 2022 Local Food Counts Project with the Food System Alliance and some other partners across the state to generate a lot of the information that was used for the Connecticut numbers. So, we are definitely participating, engaged, actively working on it. And as a region, we're talking about what does it mean and how do we move forward. There has been conversations about getting together with the different commissioner secretaries and directors of ag with some major food wholesalers, grocers, and talking about what do they need from farmers in our communities to support purchasing local. But I wouldn't say it's dead yet. I would say, you know, we just have to be realistic in what we're going to be able to achieve. And we should be striving to achieve, you know, more locally grown foods on more tables across the state and the various programs that'll support that happening.
Great. Thank you so much for your answer. Ella, do you want me to ask more questions?
Sorry. Yeah, there was another question about food systems.
Oh yeah, I can definitely ask that one too. Could you talk about what initiatives are in place to promote local procurement for school food programs and food hubs in general, and how much food is being procured this way?
Jamie, I've done a lot of talking. Both of these are, you know, between RFSI and Connect Growing for Connecticut Kids, ag transition and ag enhancement. I don't know. Do you want to take a stab at this?
Brittany, do you mind repeating the question?
No problem. All right.
Yeah, I caught her sleeping.
No, I'm on my phone. Sorry, it's harder on the phone. Okay, could you talk about what initiatives are in place to promote local procurement for school food programs and food hubs in general, and then how much food is being procured this way?
Sure. So I would say the two best options for local procurement right now are the federally funded and the state funded local food incentive programs. Now, these programs require the schools to take the initiative to say, yes, I want my school to participate in the program, and yes, I want to buy from Connecticut grown producers. We are actively involved in the state program, and we work with the State Department of Education and the Farm to School Collaborative to help matchmake farmers with those schools who have elected to sign up. There is, without a doubt, an absolute need to get more school systems enrolled in the state program. I have to be honest, off the top of my head, I don't know how many school systems are participating in the federally funded program, but right now we only have about, I think there's like 13 school systems enrolled in the state program. And we've talked internally about that, like why aren't more schools engaging? And we believe it's because there's so much participation on the federal side. The good news is that the state funds are going to continue. The language that passed makes that an annual allocation to the State Department of Education that we work cooperatively with them on. So I'm optimistic about that program. The other program that we currently have going, Commissioner mentioned earlier, is the Local Food Procurement Agreement Program. That is set to expire in 2026. It'll essentially run through next growing season. What we're waiting on, there was talk prior to the election about another round of that funding. We have yet to see anything come of that. The application process, you know, is it going to be a continuation of the current agreements? Whatever it might be, we have yet to see anything materialize on that. I'm going to stay positive and optimistic on that as well. But that would enable us to continue our work with LFPA, Connecticut Food Share, and the 7 other food banks and food pantries that we've been working with to continue that program, which again has a very concentrated effort on purchasing from Connecticut farmers. So specifically BIPOC and underserved farmers. So that I'm hoping that answered the question. I feel like there might have been another piece to that, Brittany. But those are the few things that come to my mind right away.
I would also suggest that that you guys put on a webinar. We could have Serena from our team participate. You know, there's some people on this call who are selling into commercial wholesale markets, and whether it be a food share or a school or restaurants, and have them talk about their experiences and help share out what that path was to navigate through, and then what state or federal funding they received that helped advance their farm in that process.
Great. Thank you so much. Ella?
All right. Murray has a follow-up question that expands past the farm to school into the ag ecosystem as a whole, or the food systems ecosystem as a whole.
Yeah, thanks very much, Ella, and thank you, Commissioner and Jamie. I farm in Baltic, and when I'm not farming, I work for the Small Business Development Center in conjunction with Serena Thibodeau, and trying to promote a lot of the great programs that you folks are offering. One of the things that I've noticed through both of those roles, as a farmer and through the Small Business Development Center, is that we've got a number of different food hubs / aggregators that are serving in this role of connecting farmers with consumers, and certainly folks that are food challenged. So my question is beyond the money, and the money is great. Grants are great to promote what they're trying to do, their mission, but having technical advisory services specifically for those entities, because they're all trying to figure it out themselves, and to some degree that's good because they're in local markets. But I think there'd be a real advantage to providing a greater degree of coordination, either within the state or even regionally, so that they don't have to figure it out all themselves, and they can benefit from a community of folks that are doing similar things. So I'll toss that back to you and see if you have any ideas.
Yeah, and a huge need, food system infrastructure. We're lucky to have a number in strategic pockets across the state, and to that effort, William, Serena was leading, and I say was because I'm not sure where we are on it, but she was doing I think it was quarterly convenings with all the food hubs around the state, and they were meeting at their respective in-person meetings at the respective food hubs to talk about these things. And that's how we came up with a lot of the guidance that we had for our regional food system infrastructure grant program, was the learnings and the challenges that these aggregators and food hubs were sharing as, points of frustration or challenges for their growth and expansion. So that document, the USDA gave us some flexibility on how we developed our individual state programs, but that document reflects a lot of the learnings. And Jamie, I don't know, do you know if they're still meeting? I don't.
I think I'll be honest. Serena has been spending a lot of time on Land Capital Market Access Grant, getting that off the ground, and summarizing and capturing all of our DEI related work. So I know that that's kind of been put aside while she's been focusing her efforts on that. But she was convening them, and I know she has intentions to continue that because that cross communication in that group specifically is really valuable. The other space I encourage folks to engage in is with the Connecticut Food Policy Council. We often will bring in different speakers to talk on food systems related work. And that is just a good place for folks to get together and convene and, highlight during public comment or otherwise through the board members issues in the food space that need to be discussed. So, and I think that would be a valuable place for folks to engage as well.
Great. Thank you for your answers.
Thank you. And thank you for the good work that you're doing at SBDC for our industry. We're really glad to have you there.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, Murray's a great asset. So this might be the last question that we have time for today before we move to Q&A, because I want to acknowledge the time that people have come to actually come to this space and give the people here on the chat the opportunity to ask questions. However, this is most certainly not the last pre-submitted question. So can I, in front of witnesses, extract a promise from you to answer the questions separately offline and get back to us on them?
Sure. I mean, I think we've covered maybe not the specific questions, but at least the content of the answers. So I think, but if there's anything specifically else that we missed, happy to respond.
Appreciate it. So in honor of all the livestock farmers that are here today, someone submitted that more support is needed for livestock production in Connecticut. What is DoAG's plan to accomplish this?
So I need a little help. What does support mean?
Please feel free to come offline and give the commissioner some context, or come off mute, I should say, and give the commissioner some context.
And if there's a question, again, happy to sit down and talk with individuals to determine what kind of support they're specifically looking for, so we can determine a good path forward.
So one thing I hear a lot about is processing. It's hard to
Yeah.
get things processed.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's what I was wondering. Is it processing? Is it development? Is it, access to land? I think that's all those are 15-minute answers in and of themselves. So that's why I wanted to be mindful. Processing is tough. I've been, every time I'm dealing with a farmer that raises animals, I ask about processing. And over consistently for the past year, 18 months, it is still challenging, but it is stabilized. So what I'm hearing, that's not necessarily reflective of every livestock operation in the state by any means, but what I'm hearing is that people are getting appointments. They do know where they're getting their animals processed from. They are able to increase the number of animals that they are getting processed. In fact, I was with two farmers this morning, one that raises beef, pigs, and I'm trying to think about it. I don't think he has chickens, but he's got another set, and then another who does poultry. Poultry is easy because he processes his own poultry, and he said I had to do that because there was no capacity, so I created my own, and we have invested in that operation through our grants programs over the years. But again, it's not easy, but it's more consistent than it had been previously. We have prioritized through our grants programs, increasing slaughter capacity in our Climate Smart Ag and Forestry grant program. We did an award to a processing facility in order to recognize, in recognition that we need to support processing facilities because of their vital role into increasing our livestock operations and the ability for us to continue to have livestock in Connecticut. But again, we could probably do another 10 or 15 minutes on each individual component. And I'll say this isn't a Connecticut problem. This isn't a New England problem. This isn't a Northeast problem. This is a national problem. And we are all trying to support operations through various grant programs. And Jamie, I think I said this to you a few months ago. I think there was 3 USDA rural development slaughter facilities in southern New England that received those meat processing grants. None were from Connecticut, but I think there was Vermont, or maybe it wasn't even southern New England, but I think there was 3 in the Northeast that were going to be able to expand their capacity, which, not that there's more capacity in Vermont, so that makes it easier for Connecticut farmer, but perhaps that new capacity in Vermont takes some of the lower or the southern Vermont need up, and the Massachusetts capacity, settles down in, and there'd be a shifting of the marketplace.
Thank you. So at this time, I'd like to invite everyone to go to the chat if you have any questions about something that wasn't covered, or if you have a follow-up question about something that was already said, or if you just have a question about all the acronyms that have been thrown around today. Please put your questions on the chat, and just depending on the volume of questions, we'll triage if we need to, or we'll just go sequentially. And if you see someone else asking something that you want to know the answer to, please, put a little comment on there so that we know that that's a priority question.
Ella, I dropped in the chat, and I'm gonna go grab another link in a second. Our Growing Your Farm business page. There are a few new folks on here that I haven't personally engaged with yet. That doesn't mean they haven't engaged with the agency, but I wanted to drop that in there. And I'm also going to go and grab the link to our Connecticut Weekly Ag Report. I encourage folks to make sure that they're signed up and receive that. It comes via email for free on Friday afternoons. So I'm going to go grab that as well.
Okay, while we wait for other people to write something on the chat. Ellie, I know you had a follow-up question.
Yes, we had another land access question that have been submitted. Okay. Not all current farmland preservation practices require land to be farmed actively and do not prevent resale of farmland to non-farmers. What is DoAG able to do to address these loopholes?
Yeah, that's a question that we've been talking a lot about lately. I want to correct the terminology first, Ellie. It's not a loophole. We have an obligation to follow the state statute. The state statute doesn't allow for us to restrict future sales or the use of land. The state statute says that it has to be available for agriculture. And so our charge is to follow the law, and that's what the law does state. Now, I recognize that that's not necessarily the best outcome, and we have worked really deliberately, again, on our regulations process, on our programs, to make sure that that as somebody purchases the land, that they know what they're purchasing and the restrictions that are that come with the land, the deed restrictions. But we adhere and we work the program as the statute directs us to. So I would say, one, again, comes down to priorities in an advocacy group. Is this the priority of the advocacy group to change that? And if it is, then just, think about if we're already spending 40% of our staff time on stewardship, when we don't have that additional requirement, that it would take additional staff time to manage that. I would also say that you're purchasing more of the rights from the current landowner. So each individual application is going to be higher in value because we're taking more abilities for the current landowner away from them. And so there's an economic value that would have to be included in that. So we would each parcel would be a little bit more expensive. So we would draw down on our funds significantly and would require additional. I will say we keep a couple things in mind on our application to construct process. So as part of the farmland preservation program, you can't build on your parcel without seeking approval. You can't host events without seeking approval. There are a number of limitations that an individual landowner can do. And so they have to apply. It's the application to construct. It's actually a much larger name, but that's the reality of the name, the functionality of the name. And we review it. And Jamie and Cam and I review each of these. We get together every couple of weeks to do this. And we have in mind a couple things. Is that the intent of the farmland preservation program? What they are doing, is that the intent of the farmland preservation program? What does the deed say? As we know, the deeds that were written pre-1988 didn't have restrictions on residences. In 1988, the legislature changed the farmland preservation program and put additional considerations for residences on it. So what does the deed say? And then the other component that we think about is what's the farm viability? Is this something that's going to make sure that that land is in production at the scale that they need to be in order to make sure that this remains a farm, and that somebody doesn't just sell it and walk away because they're not able to make it a profitable farm. So those are the statute, the deeds are the two most constricting factors that we have, and we are held to those. There are parcels in the state that are subject of current litigation that's being challenged, and while we may not like the outcome, the reality is that the law and the deed allowed what happened to happen, and so we are very deliberate with our application and construct review process, and hold as close to the law as we can, because that's what in the end we're responsible to. And Jamie, I don't know if you want to talk anything else about the application and construct process, or things that we've been able to approve or deny over the years.
One of the things that I will share that is included in deeds, and again, depending on the age of the deed, depends on the specific nuances. But an application to construct, when it comes in, we also take a look at the impervious surfaces and the percentage of impacts. And if USDA funds are included, it has an impact, it has an impact on the percentage of the impacts, right? So we can only permit a farmer to impact either 2 to 5% of their prime farmland soils within the easement. And again, depending on the age of the deed, depends on what that percentage is. We like to, regulations require that we turn around letters to applications to construct within 45 days from a completed application. And a lot of times that completed application piece takes a very long time to get to. And one of the things that I'm really hopeful for and plan to prioritize is with this new stewardship staff is that support to make sure that not only do landowners realize the importance of this process, but we're supporting them even more so in the process. A lot of times we're looking for specific maps versus, a back of the napkin drawing. So it can take a little while to get to that point, but 45 days is what the expectation is.
And Jamie, you brought up a good part that I failed to mention. Our current deeds restrict the size of a house. So it is a huge disincentive for somebody who wants to own a hobby, I shouldn't say a hobby operation, an estate, when they can only have a 2,500 square foot house on the property, maximum build, and that's in the deeds. So as the program has evolved, we have gotten tighter and tighter. You can only be on a certain envelope. Your house can only be of a certain size. The additional buildings can only be related to the agricultural enterprise. So the current deed, and I'd say the current deed for the past 10 or 15 years, is very clear that while we're not ensuring or requiring a farming activity, that a non-farmer would be very much so less interested in purchasing that property because they're not going to be able to do what they think they could with it.
I have just a hopefully quick follow-up, but if the statute were to be tightened so that, to the point that you made before, tighter statute around what's made possible and what law you're upholding, while the per parcel price would go up, would it reduce some of that stewardship staff time that you've been talking about over the course of the evening?
I mean, the quickest answer is Jamie and my facial reactions. So, no, because because the people who would buy it, well, one, we are held to the statute and the deed language at the time the development rights were purchased. So if something passed in 2025 Anything pre-2025 is not held to that standard.
Okay.
So, so anything in the future would be held to that standard. But anything, you know, in the previous 46 years of the program history would not be held to that standard. And we're just finding that the longer these parcels have been preserved, the more times they've changed hands, the less knowledgeable the current landowner is on what the PDR program means and the restrictions. And one of the things that we want to do with this new staff is create kind of a parcel that are, you know, package that says, you know, if you're selling your land, this is, you know, when you buy the preserved farmland, you get a, you know, a document, you know, it's going to be a binder essentially of here's what your deed means. Here's what your restrictions are. Here's what your current, you know, impacted soil percentage is. So if you only have 5%, you're at 4.3. So you've got, you know, 0.7% of your land that you're eligible to build on. So we want to do a much better job on the education component between there, so that the new owner is fully aware, so that we cut down on that stewardship component when they supply or when they submit their application to construct. But I don't think it's going to cut down on the stewardship needs. I think if anything, the longer this program continues, the more time and energy is going to have to be dedicated to stewardship. I mean, we've got 450 parcels. You know, that's just a lot.
Oofda. All right, I'll pass it back to Ella.
All right, so I just wanted to mention that the questions that have yet to be asked, I'm not going to ask them now. I'm going to ask them offline, but refer to fossil fuels and DEI and marketing efforts. So we have covered so much material now, and it's been such a dense and informative experience, but there's still a lot of material left to cover. So I'm looking forward to those answers. And I want to thank first the commissioner for suggesting that we have this town hall so early on so that we can prepare adequately for the legislative session, and then thank Commissioner Hurlbert and Jamie so much for their time today, and all of you for not only farming, but and not only doing your off-farm jobs, but for coming here in the middle of December and joining us in community to hear more and learn how we can, what DoAG is doing and what we need to do to make farming in Connecticut more accessible to beginning farmers.
Ella, I just want to point out on the DEI question, glad to answer it after the fact. I did drop in the chat a link to our DEI related page, which has our report, but we also had an update webinar a couple weeks ago to give an update on where we stand with the recommendations overall. We did record that, and if you want to take the time to watch the entire webinar, there's a link at the end of the webinar to take the survey to give us additional feedback. We are also currently in the process of writing a comprehensive update to the full report, and we are looking to get that published by the end of the year. So there's more to come on that. But again, glad to answer whatever the specific question is after this fact.
Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great night. Thank you again.
Thank you
Thank you, everybody.
very much. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.